Hello and welcome to this special episode of Twisted Britain. In this episode, I get the chance to interview the captain from True Crime Garage as part of one of the live sessions at Crimecon in Glasgow this year. Genuine pleasure to have done so, and I hope you enjoy what we're about to talk about. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for the small amount of you that have stayed for the evening session. I hope you've all had a good day. I had the opportunity to catch a few of the speeches and the talks and stuff, and it's been a really good day. I've really enjoyed it.
It was a bunch of shit.
It was a bunch of shit. We'll get to him in just a moment. So for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Bob. I'm one half of Twisted Britain. My co-host was the one with the hat on all day. You recognise him, Ali. We record a podcast in a pub, which is a really stupid idea, but we continue to do it. And it's on kind of true crime history. So if you want to check it out, please do. If you have already, thanks very much. That's good. I have the genuine pleasure this evening of having a chat and an interview and getting to introduce a man who I listened to his podcast way before I became a podcaster. True Crime Garage was one of my favourite podcasts before I started doing it, and I had the genuine pleasure of meeting the captain. Not yet Nick, but one day I will get a chance to meet Nick. But
he's AI.
He's AI. Yeah. That's it. So I get the genuine pleasure of introducing the captain this evening. Yeah. How are you?
Is this thing on?
It is now, yeah.
When I was in college studying jazz, we had a professor that every time he finished his song, he would stand up and go, and the crowd would go nuts. And so every time I get on stage, I think of him, and you're supposed to go nuts.
Come on, try again. One more time.
Yeah, one more time. There we go.
Have a seat, sir. We brought you a beer.
I know.
It is genuinely an absolute pleasure to see you. Are you well?
No. I took a nap and I woke up and I couldn't get warm. So I had to take like a hot shower, and then I'm like dry heaving. And
do you need me to sit closer and cuddle you?
Yeah, I think it's because we made out earlier.
Oh yeah, we'll get on to that bit. I've actually got a few questions about that myself later on, but don't worry about that.
Why did you grab me there?
Where on the doll did you touch me? No.
It was your bathing suit area.
No, never that area. If you're the captain tonight, can I be Admiral?
Yeah, or you could be Tennille.
Tennille?
Yeah, Captain and Tennille.
I'll do it.
You know, love will keep us together.
I mean, I could have stopped you already, but that was beautiful. Why would I stop that?
Yeah.
So I've got some questions I've written down that I'm going to ask you. But this is genuinely an interactive session, because those of you that are quite far back, feel free to move forward. I know there's a speaker system and shit like that, but it's nice to see people. If you've got a question, stick your hand up and I'll run out. I've got a microphone here and we can ask questions as we go. Let's just make this. I've got some written down, but we'll start. I'll tell you what, on you go.
Well, and real quick, I just want to say I'm friends with Nancy. Everybody knows Nancy. And Nancy called me and said, hey, you're going to be in the UK. Why not come do this event? And I said, whatever you want, anything for you. You're amazing. And you guys are amazing. But let's give a round of applause for Nancy. Thank you.
Was that, you were happy to do anything until you found out that it was me and you on the stage?
Yeah. I go, I'm down. And they go, well, Bob's going to be there. I'm like, can I get out of this?
Make him sign the papers before you tell him. That's the thing. So you've been podcasting for a while now.
Yeah, 2015.
So you must be one of the, I hate the phrase OG, but you know what I mean. You must be one of the original podcasters.
Yeah.
Why podcasting?
Well, so back in the day, you used to have to download the podcast to your computer, and then you'd have to take the file and put it on your iPod. And that's why they called it a podcast, because it had to go on your iPod. And so I was traveling 3-4 nights a week playing music gigs. And the last thing after 3 or 4 hours of playing music, the last thing you want to do is pop on, some tune, So I started listening to Coast to Coast in America, which was all about like Bigfoot and ghosts and murder. And I just thought this show is amazing. And so then I was at a Thanksgiving, and my cousin's husband lived in New York, and he's like, have you ever heard of a podcast? That's how I listen to music. And I went, I don't even know what a podcast is. So I Google searched what is a podcast, and it came out with that Adam Carolla show. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to download this. But so 4 or 5 days a week, I'm traveling, 4 or 5 hours a day, and they became my friend. Does that make any sense?
I think everybody here who listens to podcasts can relate to the fact that the voice in your ear can become more than familiar. It becomes a part of your routine.
Yeah.
It becomes part of your day. And certainly, as I said, alluded to before, I'd listened to you and Nick for years before we started the podcast originally. And
she got in it earlier.
I should have got into it earlier, yeah. You could be interviewing me at this point, yeah.
It wouldn't go well.
But I remember meeting you in
Why did you?
I remember meeting you in London the first
Yes.
time at Crimecon, and instantly recognising your voice before I recognised your face, because it's that comfort earworm that you've had on car journeys or cleaning or going to sleep or however you choose to consume your podcast. But there's something really inherently meaningful about a voice.
Yeah. And like I said, and then I was with a lady, and we were married, and I was helping raise her kids, and we moved away from my family. So I had no friends, and all day long I'd listen to these podcasts, and then she'd come home and I'd say, Adam said this today, or Adam said that. And I remember her saying, he doesn't know who you are. He's not your friend. I'm like, hey, it might be a one-way conversation, but we're fucking friends.
You can always get there. You can't always meet the people you listen to.
Well, sometimes you can. No, but the thing is, so then Nick started listening to shows, and he'd say, hey, you should check out this episode of whoever. And this is a point that I'll probably make a million times tonight. When podcasts started, there was no ad agencies. There was little ad agencies, if there was one. So I remember our show comes out, I think we hit like 32nd in the world. I'm like, we got the 32nd biggest podcast in the world, but I couldn't even pay for groceries. Yeah. So I'm like, Nick, we're 32nd in the world. He's like, that's amazing. And I was like, I got to get a job. and Nick's like, you can't. We're on to something. So he would like he'd let me borrow money so I could get groceries. And I'd get groceries, and then when I played a gig, I'd pay him back. But I remember thinking, like, how the heck are we going to make a living? And what they're doing with podcasts, and what they've been doing since we started, is they keep coming up with these rules and regulations on how they count downloads. And so you're going to see a big shift in the next couple of years, where some of the shows that you've listened to from the beginning start going away. And if you haven't noticed, in the last 6 months to a year, a lot of these podcasters are promoting Patreon and their subscription, because the money from advertising isn't coming in like it was. But here's the fucked up thing. It's only if you're not on a network. If you're on a network and they've come to us and say, hey, why don't you team up with this network, or why don't you team up with this network? And we're like, no, we're an independent podcast. We don't want somebody to tell us what to do. And so I do think when podcasts first started, it was really listener supported, going to events, buying t-shirts. Like, people don't understand, like, some people think our show is huge, but it's like Thursday night, I am rolling your t-shirt and putting it in a bag and shipping it out,
So you've kind of talked a bit about why you started podcasting, but true crime is, as we know, it's a very saturated marketplace for podcasts. Those of you that now,
but it wasn't.
So why choose it when you did? Like, why did you go down the true crime route?
Well, I mean, I think multiple reasons, but Nick kept talking about this project, And for people that don't know, Nick's my brother, and he's my older brother. That's why he doesn't listen to me on the podcast. And every time we get in a fight, he always mentions, I'm funnier than you. And I'm like, but not on the show. On the show, I'm the funny one. But I think that's also like, when you're in a room with somebody being super serious, it's hard to match that level of seriousness. So it turned into, wow, you're very serious. I'm going to be not serious.
So when you're doing the podcast, I'd written this down for later on, but
Hold on, let me finish your question.
Sorry.
So, but here's the thing though, is like, so Nick's like, I got this project, and one of the things I've learned about Nick, which I think is a really amazing quality, is he won't talk. He'll tell you he's working on something. He just won't tell you what it is. He didn't tell me about the book he wrote until it was coming out. He's like, and it was like, I think the book's coming out in 2 weeks. And I like look it up online. I'm like, no, the book's out now. Thanks for telling me. But he believes that a lot of people go, one day I'm going to start a podcast. One day I'm going to start a YouTube channel. And we call that someday isle, like an island. And you're on someday isle, and someday you'll do something. But most people never get off that island. And so we're sitting around drinking beer in his garage. And he said, I think we should do a podcast. And I was like, yes. What are we going to talk about? And he's like, I have it all, true crime. And from the beginning, he's like, I'm going to be Nick, but you're going to be somebody else. And he's like, I have this intro. I'm going to say, welcome to whatever we're called. And then I'm going to do a little joke about you every time. And then I'm going to end the show, be good, be kind, and don't litter. He had it all like mapped out in his head. And the truth is, there was no talk about releasing it. It was like, let's just record it to see if we could, because I was an audio engineer.
Yeah.
So the first couple episodes, like, he would get up in the middle of the episode and like go to the refrigerator and grab a beer, and you'd hear him like walk away from the mic, and he'd be like talking like this. But it was fascinating to me that he had it all worked out in his head. And what people don't understand, so my father is a detective, but my brother, since we're like in kindergarten, like, it was part of his identity that people are like, your brother's really smart and he knows a lot about crime. And
You've got other brothers though, right?
Yeah, they're not as smart. I always wonder if he's like mad at us.
Oh yeah.
We didn't invite him. He's like the fourth Hanson brother,
Right, yeah. Not as handsome, not quite as talented.
Wasn't allowed to sing Bop.
Nah. He got bopped off.
Yeah, they bopped him away.
It's interesting you say, because you were an audio engineer, and that's a way into starting it.
Yeah.
When we started Twisted Britain, it was with my previous co-host, Nadine, before Alistair joined me. And I did it to learn sound editing.
Yeah.
Like, from almost the other side. Because in my pre-podcasting mind, and I would imagine you probably had thoughts yourself, it's easy. You record it, and then you cut the bits that you don't want out, and you bin them, and you fling it on the internet, and hundreds of thousands of people listen.
And you make millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars.
Yeah.
All of that's horse shit.
Yeah.
Like, and the work that goes to podcasting is mental.
Yeah, so if you listen to like an hour-long episode, and it's a good editor, they probably spent 3 hours on editing and putting together the show. And then ours is a little different because we do music every week that goes along with the episode. And we've been doing the show 750 some episodes. And some people have no clue that every episode I've created new music for. And so on the internet, there's like hundreds and hundreds of these tracks that I've made for our show. And most of the listeners are like, oh, you did that? I just thought it was shitty music.
It's wonderful music.
I think we're like 6 episodes in, and like the music sucked in the beginning. I didn't know what I was doing. I was always doing it last minute. And so then eventually I was taking it serious. But we had a lady one time send us a thing that said, I love your podcast, but the music is embarrassing. So anytime somebody will come up and say, I love the music of your show, Nick will go, yeah, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
Never listen to negative reviews.
Yeah.
So when we worked out that I would be doing this interview with you, I thought, you know what, I'm going to Google the captain and see what comes up. And you guys will know yourself. You Google something and you get a list of suggested questions on Google.
Oh.
So I just Googled the Captain True Crime Garage previous interviews to see who I was stacking up against. And then instantly stopped reading all that when I realized that the top question that Google suggests when you put your name in is the captain drunk?
Yeah. No, and so if you listen to the show enough, I dealt with like severe depression for a long time. So when we'd start the show, Nick was like, I have this idea that we're going to pair a beer. Normally, like, you know, if the crime took place in Seattle, we're going to have a Seattle beer. And I was like, but I don't drink. And so he was like, well, that's fine. You don't have to. Like the audience only knows what you know. So then if I say a bunch of dumb shit, then the comments are like, he must be drunk. But it's like, I can't drink once a week, or I'm like, get very close to jumping off a bridge. And that's not a good thing.
We don't need, if you do that, will you send me the notes of your thoughts beforehand? It's just.
No,
because
I wanted to jump off a bridge.
Dear Bob. So you've done what, 750 odd episodes?
Yeah.
We reckon.
Plus bonus episodes. Yeah.
In amongst them, is there a case that sticks in your mind?
All of them. Well, not all of them, but I call them red light cases. They're cases that you can't get out of your head. One of mine is, does people know the West Memphis 3 case? So I know a lot of people are very opinionated on whether they're guilty or they're innocent. And in that case, for the most part, I think they're innocent. But there's little things about, like at the start of the second documentary, he says, it's going to be cool now. Because people are going to think, instead of the boogeyman being under the bed, they're going to be looking for me. And that's pretty cool. And you're like, wait a second. If you're innocent of the crime, that's not something you should be proud of. And so there's little things like that in that case that bother me. So I can stop at a red light and go, that bothers me. And then by the next red light go, it's fine, he's innocent. So West Memphis 3, to the point where I'm not like allowed to look it up on YouTube anymore at night. Because I've gone down some crazy rabbit holes.
Yeah, I'll bet.
I mean, I would love to debate that case with people, like people that think they're innocent, because I could like keep bringing up stuff that you would be like, wait, that doesn't make, like for example, they just won the right to test items. Did you know that they created the list of items they want to test, and that they've left off items?
Yeah, but Damien did. It was Damien, wasn't it?
The other two are not involved. Yeah. And then also, like, at the trial, they brought up the fact that he was possibly into Aleister Crowley. Does anybody know who Aleister Crowley is?
He had a house on Loch Ness, not that far from here, yeah.
Well, Aleister Crowley, like, he was a cult, and he actually...
He was an asshole.
Super big asshole. But he bought a house on Loch Ness to look for Nessie, and only bought the house because he thought it had magical powers. But he believed that if you killed a child, that you would basically become like a god on earth. And the age of that child was a 8-year-old child. The 3 victims were 8 years old in that case. So that's kind of weird that it lines up. And then the guy gets out of prison after he admitted that the state had enough evidence to convict him, after he said weird shit, and then he makes poses on Instagram, same poses that Aleister Crowley used to make. And to me, that's insensitive to the victims' families, that's insensitive to the people that supported him in prison. And we're not talking about like, oh, well, it's just a pose that everybody makes. No, these are poses that were made famous by this guy that told the whole world, if you kill an 8-year-old child, that you'll become a god on earth. And so I don't know why he does these things, because I think it's very, but you can be a big asshole and not be a murderer. So, but that one bothers me. The Jonbenet Ramsey case bothers me. Has anybody heard about the teddy bear with Jonbenet Ramsey? So there's all the crime scene photos, and you can see them online. And in her bedroom, she had two beds. And on one of the beds, the one that she wasn't sleeping on was a teddy bear. And when they were asking the parents to look through the photos to see if anything stuck out, both of the parents said, we don't know where this bear came from. And so when you have a 6-year-old girl telling everybody for weeks, Santa Claus is going to visit me after Christmas and bring me a gift, and an item shows up in your house that you don't know where it came from, I think that's pretty fucking weird. And so that has always bothered me. And there used to be an explanation for it online. There was a website called Candy Rose that was all about it. But that whole section about the teddy bear is gone. Doesn't exist anymore. And so it's stuff like that like I walk around my house and just ponder this shit, or like missing persons, Brian Schaefer or Mara Murray or any of these. Like I just, you know how it is.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, absolutely. We've got cases that we've covered on Twisted Britain, and I know obviously a slightly smaller platform, that I hate an unfinished case. It's one of those things that just bores in my mind. Ali does it deliberately every now and again, writes one that's completely unsolved because he knows that I'm going to be pissed off for 3 or 4 days afterwards. We had a discussion recently. This is not written down, but just
hold on a second. What's fascinating to me is analytically, our show does better when it's a solved case.
Is that right?
Because like that's why people like Dateline. It starts off, there's a mystery, and at the end, we tell you what happens. But the problem is, those families aren't reaching out to us. So when a kid was murdered and they have no leads and they're reaching out to you and going, hey, can you just please talk about this case? Can you please make my son matter?
Yeah.
And you want to let them know, like, your son mattered, period. It doesn't matter if he's talked about on a podcast or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, you know, as well as I know, is like we've done cases on like an unsolved case, and then a detective reaches out and says, hey, we got some leads because of your show. And one of the Columbus cases got solved, and the detective didn't want to admit it, but he's like, I think it kind of indirectly was because of you guys. And we're like, oh, awesome, cool. You know, but yeah, but see, if I did what Nick did, I'd brag about it all the time. Nick, my brother has a group called Project Porchlight, and they pay for DNA testing on crimes that they have DNA. But what's crazy is, could you imagine if your loved one was raped and murdered and the department was saying, we have their DNA, but we just don't have the money to run the test? So Nick started this group called Project Porchlight, and the first case that they went after, the organization didn't have any money, and he wrote like a $6,000 check to get the test done, and then it was a random stranger, and they went and arrested him, and now he's sitting behind bars. And you're like, you fucking solved a case. I'd be like telling everybody about it. Like, he doesn't talk about that shit at all. And I'm like,
and it's mad because the top Google question for you is the captain drunk?
Yeah.
And he's solving crime.
And he's solving crime. No, the best though is I was at a bar in my hometown.
None of us are surprised.
Yeah, I was at this bar, and this guy runs in and he goes, hey man, your brother is a guy from high school. He's like, your brother does True Crime Garage, man. That's fucking awesome. He's like, and didn't he just write a book? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, didn't he solve that murder up in Cleveland? And I'm like, I don't know how you know all this shit. And then when he goes to leave, he said, hey, hang in there, man. And I was like, does he not know that I'm on the show?
But which one of you is in Crimecon, Glasgow?
Yeah, not Nick.
That's right.
Hey, See you later, loser.
Take that, Nick.
Yeah.
So, just kind of leading off what you were talking about there, Ali and I had a discussion recently about cold cases. And obviously, most jurisdictions and police forces keep cases open almost indefinitely, in case a lead comes up like you're talking about. We had a discussion recently about when does a cold case go from the point of cold, we might find something, to, I think we used the term frozen case. Like there must be a point, when we're talking about like, historically, there must be a point in years.
Yeah, or depending on lack of evidence, because, I mean, look, if you have no evidence, 5 years into no evidence, you go, well, what do we got to go on? I mean, what's great is my dad was a detective, and we're probably doing the show for like 2 or 3 years. And then my dad was like, hey, I heard you guys have a podcast on crime. I didn't know you guys were into that. And I was like, Nick has been into it since he's like a baby.
I think
like,
if you asked my dad what a podcast was, he'd go and try and turn his modem on.
Yeah. No, my dad is a very interesting person. My parents got divorced, and it was just me and my father, and I played in the orchestra and jazz band and all this stuff. And I remember saying to my dad, hey, we got to go to the school to pick up my tuxedo for jazz band. And he goes, you playing jazz band? And this is like 6 years of playing in jazz band. And I was like, yeah, I play in jazz band. And so then my dad goes, are you gay? And then it was a joke in his mind. So I just was like, oh, that was a joke. So we get in the car, but he felt so bad about the joke that the whole ride to the school, he's like, well, it was just a joke. But see, guys I went to school with that were in the jazz band, they were gay. And
what did you play in jazz band?
Bass.
Nice, man. You've travelled most of Ohio, have you not? Playing bass in bands. I read that on the internet.
Most of U.S.
I've read some reviews of your shows.
And out of this, yeah, for a long time, which I don't know how it happened. I was in the band with Nick.
Yeah.
Because he made me, just like the podcast.
There's a theme here, isn't there? Like, yeah.
Yeah, no, the funny thing was I was learning bass. I was like really big into soccer. I think you guys call it football.
Yeah, real football.
And I was a really good goalie. And my brother played bass, and so I just like practiced bass on the side. And I remember one day I'm like in the basement practicing my bass, and Nick came downstairs and was like, get upstairs. You're in the band. I don't look cool singing and playing bass at the same time. Do you remember Airheads?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
That was like our big influence. Like we had a song that basically sounded like the Airhead song.
100%. See, if we ever do this again, can we have a photo of you in that band up here? No, I'll put a photo of me in the 90s up as well, but I'd love to see that.
Morgan, my buddy Morgan, he used to go to our gigs just to make fun of us.
That doesn't even surprise me.
Yeah. And
so,
okay.
We've probably got time for one more question from me, and then we'll ask if anybody else has got it. So the only other question I was going to have for you was, have you ever come across a case that you would just decided that you wouldn't cover? Where's the bar for
Bulger?
For
No, what's his name? The little boy that was a kid.
Jamie Bulger.
Yeah, Jamie. When I first heard about the case, I went, "Oh my God, we got to cover this." And I told Nick about it, and like I said, Nick was the expert. Like when we started the show, it was like, "Well, Nick's the expert," and then it's also a weird thing to like eventually like okay, so the first couple episodes, I was like trying to be a part of the show, and then I got so many like nasty emails. And this one guy was so set on me like hanging myself. He would like send like an email like twice a day.
I'm sorry for sending them.
Yeah. But it was insane because it was like, I think it was like our 9th episode, and I just told Nick, I have too many like mental issues.
There's demons there that go
with
it.
And I'm like, I don't want to do this and then get this negative feedback. And so there's like, if you listen to those, like, I don't know, it's like episode 9, 10, around there, like I just start not talking. And I'm just like trying to record him. And then eventually Nick was like, I can't do this without you. So it's a really fucking weird world to be like, one, you got to take a step back to your brother because he's the talented one, and support. I mean, this is his dream. I don't want to talk about murders.
Okay.
And does anybody know the Mara Murray case? So
I love this audience. You can literally ask anything. Like, yeah, of course I do.
Mara Murray
I've written a fucking book on it.
Mara Murray was this student that she told her school that she had this family emergency, but she never told her family there was no emergency, and she took off in a direction that was not home. And she got in this wreck, and somebody stopped to help her, and by the time he called the cops, it was only like a 7-minute window, and when the cops showed up, she was gone. And a lot of people thought that maybe her boyfriend was involved somehow. And so one day on Twitter, I get a message from the guy's name's Bill Roush, and he grew up like a couple miles from me. And actually, I think we played against each other in some kind of sporting competition when we were kids. And he's like, hey, I would love to talk to you about the case. And I'm going, people think you're the murderer. Hell yeah, I'll talk to you on the phone. And we talked for 8.5 hours the first day, just paced. And I pace when I'm on the phone, so I'm just pacing and pacing. 8.5 hours because I was convinced, like he wouldn't shut the fuck up. And I'm like, I'm convinced I can get him to say, I mean, he was saying some like really bad shit. And I was like, because he was accused of all these assaults and stuff. And he was like basically confiding in me, like I did this crime and I did this crime and I'm going to plead guilty. And
it's got traits of the second longest prison sentence in Scottish history was handed out about a month ago. I'm sure all of you here will know the Emma Caldwell story. I won't say his name. I refuse to. In my day job outside of podcasting, I work for a large media corporation, filming. It's like ABC, but slightly different. Yeah. And I had the horror of going into the Glasgow Sheriff Court while he was being tried recently. I was filming with one of our correspondents, a guy by the name of Dave Cowan, who's a wonderful, wonderful journalist. And just sitting watching somebody who had put themselves up for interview on the television to say, this is a mad case. It's that level of absolute sociopath that comes from the same sort of thing where he's happy to talk to you because he's singing his own praises, but it's not me. And there's that level of removal from the human psyche that really baffles me about some people that we talk about.
Well, and I think some of these cases where you have if you have a lot of evidence against somebody and they're like, no, I'm innocent, some of me wonders, because there are cases that people have killed somebody and they don't remember it. So if they don't remember it, then are they guilty of doing it? Because they don't remember doing it.
Yes.
I mean, obviously they're guilty of doing the crime.
yeah, totally.
But what I'm saying is, if you start trying to trip them up, they don't actually believe that they did anything. So, I don't know. It's
Captain, we have about 5 minutes left, I think.
Oh God, that went fast.
Yeah, sorry, we've just sat here and talked. Well,
except for some people in the audience who are like, they didn't go fast at all.
Boring. A couple of folk asleep in the audience.
Yeah.
Is there anybody that, Ali, grab that. Here. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to ask a question of the captain or myself? I mean, Ali, down here. Oh no, we'll come to you next.
So I know we've already spoke about cases that you can't stop thinking about, but is there any cases that has emotionally damaged you by doing research or by putting the stories out there that just stick with you in that sense?
Yeah, and some of them, like the Casey Anthony case, really bothers me because I don't think we should call it true crime. I don't think that's the correct title for the genre. It should be called What We Think We Know So Far. And it's just like, if you look at that case, nobody has ever told you the right story of how that kid died. And how they died was the mom was going out to bars and she was basically drugging her daughter and putting her daughter in the trunk. And anybody that has gone to college or university knows that, like, Have you ever gone on a date and you have like leftovers, like leftover food, and you put it in your car, and then you went out drinking, and then you came back to your car the next day and it's hot, and you know, that's what fucking happened. The kid died in Florida heat, the kid would die within 5 minutes in that trunk. And so if she's 5 minutes late from waking up, and obviously if she's going out getting drunk, at some point she's not going to wake up on time. And that's what happened, and that child died in that trunk. And what's sad is there's been a million documentaries, and nobody has ever said that's how that happened. And that's how that happened. I'm 100%. So
I think from my side, the ones that we cover, because they're slightly more historical, nothing ever sticks with me, because I would tend to not talk about something that I'm uncomfortable with. The things that always stick with me, that I always go, and they sink in my head, is when there's a big change in society or a change in policing that's come from such a horrific event. So Ali and I covered the case of Jonbenet Ramsey recently, who was a 3-year-old girl who was in hospital, who was kidnapped from the hospital by a guy who blamed drink, which is not an excuse, and sexually assaulted her and then killed her in the grounds of the hospital. But what happened after that was a mass fingerprinting of about 60,000 males in the surrounding area, and it basically changed policing. It changed the way. They're the things that stick with me, probably because I don't like reading about the stuff. I couldn't do the Jonbenet case. I've got nothing to add to it, and also I can't read all that stuff.
Here's what bothers me the most, and like I said, I think it shouldn't be called true crime. It should be called what we think we know so far. And that first started happening with Brian Schaefer. Was a kid that went into a bar, and he's on video going into a bar, and then he's not really on video coming out of the bar. And he was drunk out of his fucking mind. But his dad, when people were looking for him, was like, my son wasn't drunk. And then these girls they flirted with him, and he exchanged numbers with them. And he was then in the media going, my son had a girlfriend. He was going to get engaged, which was not true. And he was trying to say that these girls were whores and they were drunk sluts, and my son never would have gave them his number. And so he was trying to control the story. And just like West Memphis 3, so these are the things that bothered me the most, is when you hear this story of these 3 boys were murdered and they just went after these 3 teenage boys because they listened to Metallica. And you go, that's not true.
Yeah.
He even admitted he was getting disability from the state. And he put on, the reason why he wanted disability was he said he was homicidal and suicidal. And it's like, if he's telling law enforcement, they didn't just show up at his house and go, what Metallica CD do you like? Well, kill them all, you're arrested. No, there was a reason why they were looking at him.
Good tune, though.
Good tune, you know.
We are pretty much, can we have 5 minutes, Nancy, is that right? Just to wrap up.
Do you want more 5 minutes? Yes!
Talking about cold cases, have you looked into Madeleine McCann at all?
Yes, and oh my God.
Good night.
Madeleine McCann.
I'm gonna go out there and say from the start, and you can have your moment in it.
Go ahead.
I'm no fucking touching it. For on so many levels. We talked earlier in one of the first talks. Steve Keel said this morning that the hardest thing to do is remove yourself from a case as a police officer. As a podcaster, it's not quite as important as removing yourself from a case as a police officer, but you have to be able to do it. If you're going to produce something that is tangible, factual, and ready for an audience, you can't have a really inherent opinion. And for that reason, Ali and I are out.
Wait.
Thank you very much.
Wait.
I don't want 5% of your company. I'm out.
Wait, are you saying that
We just wouldn't touch it.
you think as a podcaster you're not allowed to have an opinion?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. And we will come back to your question, sorry. That's not what I'm saying. You can have opinion. And of course, part of what people listen to is your opinion and the way that you've scripted it and the way that you've written it and the way you tell it. But I think if you've got an inherent like side that you take, that's a different matter. If you can't balance that by telling the story properly.
Right. No, but see, that's where I differ, because I think with the freedom of speech, if somebody feels strongly that the parents are guilty or the parents are innocent, that's for them to tell the story. You know what I mean? Like,
that's kind of what I mean, though.
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you, in my opinion, I'm here to tell you the story and let you make your own decision.
Right.
I don't want to force my opinion.
Yeah.
Unless I've had 3 or 4 pints, then I might,
Yeah. No, we always try to tell the story, and then if there's time, we like to say, well, we think maybe this happened, or maybe we would want this question answered. We covered that case. The thing that sucked was, for whatever reason, I kept on calling her McCann. And so I was like, and I couldn't stop doing it. And so I eventually just had to say, like, we just got to keep recording, so for 2 hours, I'm saying the victim's name wrong, which is very disrespectful. And I knew I was doing it. I couldn't fix it. But that one is so tough because the parents, but there's some dark shit in there. And there's a guy that they befriended, the family, and he's connected to the Podestos in America, which are like known pedophile ring. And it gets really dark. And what's sad is, they don't want you talking about that stuff. Like, I've been saying it from the beginning. There's certain things that we covered this track episode called Boys on the Tracks, and these 2 boys were murdered. They try to make it look like they just got drunk and fell asleep on the train tracks, but there was bullet holes in them, and then there was like 10 eyewitnesses that were murdered. And so it got so dark, and it was all connected to Bill Clinton. And the more we dove into it, the more I was like, I don't want to talk about this because somebody might show up at my door and get rid of me. So
we've gone way deeper than I thought we were going to go.
No, so hold on. Here's what I like to do, though. Every now and then, I just like to tell my phone, I love the government. And,
well, you've got a fucking microphone plugged into mine. I'm fucked tomorrow.
I love the government, and you do everything for me. Yeah. Please don't kill me.
Move here. I was going to say move here. It's better. It's not. Fuck that. Ladies and gentlemen, we have. Oh, I tell you what. We don't.
One more. Come on, one more.
One more.
Stephen Avery, yes or no?
You asked for it.
The problem is that Stephen Avery is such a piece of shit. You know, and
yes.
And the first thing that you have to think about is somebody capable of committing the crime? I really think that her boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend, should have been looked at more. There's a scene where he is talking to the search party, and the gulps in his mouth, you know, because he's so nervous. It's just strange. Like he's acting so strange. And again, a lot of these cases are not that hard to solve. It's like, it's normally somebody close to the victim, and obviously he would have motive because they weren't together, you know, but.
Is that a quick one?
Yeah, how do you pick your crimes that you do or happen to do?
I think we've covered that. Nick does all the work.
Nick does all the work. No, actually, when we first started, it was just like, oh, I think this one's interesting, we should talk about it. Which kind of sucks because we talked about some of the big cases early on, and I'd like to revisit them. We're actually going to revisit the West Memphis 3 case a little bit and talk about what we've learned from them. I mean, a lot of people don't know that there was like seven or 8 eyewitnesses that recanted their statement and never testified against them in trial. And they're admitting that these people confessed to them the crime. And I think that would have changed the way, if you watch a documentary and you have 10 people on the stand saying that these people confessed that they killed these kids, you're probably not making a second documentary about their innocence. So, but now what we do is just, there's actually 2 ways. We've actually had a lot of law enforcement reach out to us, and they will just tell us, we are stuck, and here's the case file. And oh, by the way, we never gave you the case file. And so if we say, oh, we talked to law enforcement, we've really talked to law enforcement, which is great because they're doing everything in their power to try to get people to talk about the case, because if people stop talking about the case, it goes away. And every law enforcement has a limited budget, right? So once it goes away, then those people are forgotten.
And
on that note,
to wrap it up, I'll answer your question. I Google 3 random words. One's a place, one's a crime, and one's a nonsense word, and I see what comes up on Google. That's how I find mine. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
I've had a blast. Thank you very much for listening to our live recording from Crimecon. I hope you enjoyed it. It was great fun talking to the captain, and hopefully we'll be doing so again. We'll leave you, as I always do, with a thank you, love you, bye.
Thank you, bye. I can hear myself. Love you, bye.